Well, my brother Elwood, the best I remember, I guess I was about 3 years old when I started remembering things good. We lived on a farm. We had a creek that ran about a block from the house, and we first had a log house. Then my father built a house behind it. We had this huge double log barn that you put hay in either side. You feed that to your stock, and it had like a breezeway, which was a drive-through to unload the hay into the barn. And we had hogs and cows and horses and mules. And my brother grew up in all of that, and he learned to take care of the animals for my father and mother. And he'd feed the chickens. And he loved to fish and play in the creek and swim. And of course, when he got old enough, he started to school. We went to Black Springs, a little country schoolhouse that was just a wooden building, and you went from first to 8th grade in it. We had something we called primer that we went to the first year. And we loved our school teacher, Ms. Zena Alexander. She taught all the grades up to 6th. Another teacher taught through 8th. And we had to walk about 2.5 miles each way to school. Our mother would pack us a lunch in a little syrup bucket that Cairo came in. It was all striped and pretty. And we'd eat lunch at school, and when school was out, my older brother James looked after us too and saw we got to school and back. And he was in a grade or 2 above Elwood. And he liked to hunt. He taught me how to shoot a .22 when I was about 6. Him and James, they'd go out and stick the gun. I couldn't hold it up, it was so heavy. Right, so they'd stick it between the picket fence of the garden, so it'd be steady, and they'd put a tin can out so far so I could hit that. I learned how to do that, and then they went on to other things. And they'd bring whatever they got home, and my mother would cook it and serve it for dinner, supper, whatever.
Do you remember when Uncle Elwood left to join the Army?
Yes, I do. I was a little over 12, and he left real quick right after he signed up. He brought the sergeant home from Norman. He was there recruiting veterans, and my dad, I don't remember if he had to sign papers for him or not, because he was already 18, and he'd be 19 in the fall. And it was the last of May, I remember. And I think in about 2 weeks he was gone. We didn't hear very much from him at all the first year. And he didn't come home either that year. But then about a year later, he came home and spent 30 days with us. He went to Fort Francis E. Warren, Wyoming, so that's quite a distance. And you only got $21 a month, so your train ticket or however you came would have cost you most of that. So he couldn't afford to come home. And first time he did come home, we really had a ball. He went to see all of his friends and all of his old grandmas and aunts and friends that he had around the county. And he was a rounder for that because he had lots of friends. And I think he went down to the school, saw all the kids he'd gone to school with. He only went to the 10th grade.
When he was, after the first year he was gone, did he write very often?
No, he really didn't. And he told us he took care of the mules and the horses because the cavalry used them back them days.
Yeah, before all that.
Yeah, before the war started, World War II.
Was he stationed up there when World War II started, or what?
No, they had moved him to Houston, Fort Sam.
So he's a lot closer then, right?
Yeah, and when I married when I was 16, and I went to Dallas for a few months, and he came up to see me. One time he just had a day mission in Dallas for something, and we saw him, had dinner with him. Then the next time he come back and stayed about 4 or 5 days with us. And I got to know him kind of all over again then. Mm-hmm. And he always dressed so neat. Every crease had to be so. He wore 2 in front and 3 behind. And your shoes was shining. You could see your face in them.
He was very much a military man.
Oh, yes, he was strictly military. And he didn't drink or smoke or any of that kind of stuff.
It's very clean cut.
Yeah. And he loved my mother's pickled peaches, and he'd always hit the door asking Mom if she had any pickled peaches. He wanted some pickled peaches right now. She'd always have them ready for him.
That's always good.
And he'd try to enjoy himself while he was home. Usually it'd take 20 days, and then he'd spend 10 days going to see other relations in Oklahoma and about. And sometimes he'd go off to Texas because we had lots of relations there. And he liked kind of traveling, but not a whole lot. He never went with girls that I ever knew of. So I don't know how that part of his life went. And he'd usually write Mother and Dad, maybe once a month or something like that, but we wrote to him all the time and kept him up on everything.
So in World War II, he went and served in North Africa, right? That's where he started off at?
He started off in North Africa about 4 months, I believe, something like that, before it ended in Africa. He was with the, what was the colonel's name?
Patton? Was he with
He
Patton?
was with Patton. Then him and my brother-in-law left my husband in Africa. He couldn't catch up with them. They both went on the same convoy to Italy when we first invaded Italy and through Sicily and that way. It was a very, very hard battle. They finally got a toehold. Then they went all the way up Italy, went into Germany, and then all the way through Germany.
Very nice.
And then he came home, and his enlistment was up. So he came out for 9 months, and he went to Detroit to my oldest brother's house and stayed with them, trying to get work, but he didn't like factory work. That wasn't his thing.
Yeah.
And so he decided to come back home because the service had told him if he'd signed back up before the 9 months was up, he could get his stripes back. He was a sergeant by that time. So he went to Oklahoma City because we had folks there and signed up. And he'd come home also for my sister's funeral, or our sister's funeral. And then he went on. And I don't remember exactly where he went when he left there, but I think Georgia. And no, he went back to Fort Sam, I believe.
Yeah, so he joined back up.
And
right
he started training men for World War II. And he went to Fort Hood. He went to Polk in Louisiana and trained a lot. Then he went on the Mississippi side of the river, Mississippi River, and trained up and down it to Mobile a lot. And then I think he went to Georgia from there, and then they sent him to Fort Dix, and overseas he went to North Africa. And we didn't hear from him very often from then on till the war was over with.
Okay. And after the war, he came back and re-signed up again, like you were saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he married Gerda. He met her his second hitch in Germany, and married her and brought her home. And she was pregnant. And she stayed with Mother and Dad till he got settled in Denver and got a place to live and that stuff. And then she went to him.
What was Gerda like?
Well, she had a hard time at first because she couldn't speak English very well. And she had a hard time trying to understand what we meant. Because what meant like ice in our language was ice. In her language, it's hot.
So it's completely
So
opposite.
it was kind of strange at first, but she did real well, and Mom and Dad tried to be kind and gentle and work with her, and all the rest of the family. And she worked real hard at it. She'd been taking lessons and things before she left Germany. Had this little book, you know, how to tell her different things.
Very nice.
And I got married, of course, and I was in California by that time. So he wrote and told me about her being born. Actually, he sent me a wire. We had a donut shop in Huntington Park at that time, and finally he just called me up. But he was in Denver training for the Korean War. They was teaching him how to ski and walk in snowshoes, because it was very cold in Korea, one of the coldest winters it had ever been.
So he was kind of like in the mountain division of the cavalry, huh?
I guess that's where they took him anyway. I can't remember or pronounce the town. I think it was the northern capital, I guess is what you call it. And he was very dedicated to his men, and he had got hurt real bad once and been in the hospital a few days, but he went back with his men regardless.
While he was in Korea?
Mm-hmm. Before he became missing.
Did you see him before he left, or like when was the last time you saw him?
1949, about late June or 1st of July.
Before he moved
I
on
came
to-
home with my 2 children from California and stayed a couple of weeks, and he came in while I was here.
So he got to see...
And Josie was 6 months old. And then he went back home and trained a little more, and then he left August the 28th. And he went straight over. And then my brother Jeffrey, he followed about 4 months later or something like that, I believe. And they got real close to each other, but they never did get to see each other, because my brother Jeff got cut off and couldn't get back to his outfit for quite a while. The whole company did. And then I got a letter from him. He had come in a few days before Thanksgiving that year, and it seemed like Thanksgiving run early that year. And so he wrote his wife a letter, my mother, and me. And he mailed them all at the same time. And he said, well, he had a friend or two he had to write to. And he was so happy to be in, because he said he hadn't had a bath on his feet and changed his shoes in 2 months, or his clothes, and how wonderful it was to be clean again. And he says, I've got to go back out. My men are going to go back out in 2 or 3 days. And he said, I've got to go with them. I assume he was probably in the hospital at the time, because he had hurt his leg or something or other. And he said, oh, it's not very bad.
Yeah.
But it was. And
Do you still have the...
on Christmas Day, no, I gave them to my mother and Gerda said she took them, but I don't know if Josie realizes she has them or if she has them or not, because a lot of her mother's stuff got destroyed. And there's some kind of flood they had, or leakage or something in the basement. Anyway, we got the telegram Christmas night.
That he was missing?
Yes. And we was in Mina. We'd had Christmas with my parents. And I'd gone home with my brother Darius and Opal to Mina. Was going to spend a few days with them before we went on to California. And I come back home immediately, of course. And Mother and Dad was very upset. So we tried to deal with that the best we could. And then we didn't hear anything else for quite a while. But 1954, I believe, I forget, March, I believe it was, they declared him dead finally.
Okay.
And Gerda got her insurance, whatever he had. I think it was $8,000 or something like that. So she went immediately and bought him a tombstone and put it up in Mount Gilead, her and my mother.
Okay.
And she just put it rest in Korea and hoped and prayed we'd get him someday. But she never did believe he was dead. Never.
Gerda never did?
Mm-mm. And about, I don't remember, must have been 2 or 3 years after that, she decided that she'd like to remarry a man she'd met in the service. So she come to my father and mother and asked what they thought about it, and if she'd be doing wrong. Did they think he was dead or alive? And he was from Arkadelphia area, been raised there. He went and got his parents and his brother, I believe, and brought them and introduced them to my parents. And Mother and Dad went through it all. And they thought, well, maybe it would be a good idea. So she went ahead and married Rex Breckenridge. And then a few years later, they divorced. She never did marry again.
So she really became kind of like part of the family, and
Yes.
your parents kind of became her adopted American parents.
Yes.
Even though Elwood had, been declared, dead and
Did.
everything.
Well, eventually she took the name Green back.
Okay.
And she still didn't believe, well, she died not believing he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
She had cancer. She's been dead for 20 years. I saw her just before she passed away. She came down to visit Octavia and I, and she'd talk about him just like he was here.
Huh. Well, it's very good that she was able to return and be, laid to rest with him now.
And she did the best she could by trying to take care of her daughter, and she worked all the time nearly, even though she got a little allotment or something from the government, I think, for Joe Helen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't too hip on POWs at that time. It just kind of faded away. And they call it the Forgotten War.
Mm-hmm.
But we never gave up hope and took care of it the best we could to try to find out what was going on.
Yeah, I always remember coming over to your houses when I was a kid, and all the time that I spent there, and seeing his picture, up there on the wall with him sitting in the chair. I always remember that picture.
Oh yeah, George was hell on that. He always believed in the servicemen and looking up to them and taking care of them and everything. And he got to know my brother very little, but he liked him and knew what he stood for.
Very good.
And we've always been a military family from my great-grandfather He even fought in the Mexican War and the Civil War. And my dad had been appointed to go to West Point, but he became a cripple from blood poisoning, and they wouldn't let him go. So I guess Elwood was kind of replacing what he missed.
How did you feel when you found out that they had finally identified his remains and were bringing them home? When you got the phone call, how did
Well,
you feel?
I had been kind of halfway expecting to hear about it because I knew they had a new way of identifying DNA. And we had this friend in Hawaii that had worked in that for about 3 years, but she left and had to go to Washington. So we couldn't, she kept us posted all how it's coming along. And we were good friends with her. She was actually a friend of Margaret's, but she'd come to our house all the time and bring her kids. And she went to, I think she's a general now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still friends. And we just kept hoping and hoping. But I was kind of dumbfounded in a way, and it was such a relief in a way, and such joy. I can't really tell you. It was a great mixture of many feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And happy too. And happy for Josie.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole family for that matter.
It's a very good occasion for the whole family, I think.
Yes,
really
it
good
was.
Bring closure and everything.
I can die in peace now because this is what I've been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a lovely funeral and a wonderful burial with respect and everything, what a soldier boy should have.
I think that's good, Grandma. You did really good.
Thank you.